Don, I read a piece by, and I guess, was this in Jacobin? Maybe it was with Gabe Winnett, who we've interviewed on this program. And I think this is in his voice, but he writes, the distinctive equality of Ewok organizing became clear to me in a conversation with a worker who said to me at a crucial inflection point, I'm realizing that I can't persuade anyone of anything. I just need to tell them what I really think and ask them what they really think. And then they'll do what they're going to do. And I can't control that. Oh my God, I just realized that's what you did in this conversation with me. Will you like expand on that dynamic, like in the way, because I'm not familiar really with another model like the one that Ewok is using right now, particularly in the way that the genesis where you're not going into a situation with an agenda per se, a narrow agenda,
right.
For Ewok. Like you're trying to achieve almost like, what they're trying to achieve. And it's almost like like a therapist on some level, or, having come from the film business, a good producer comes in and is trying to, like, what the director wants to do. I'm trying to sort of optimize what you're doing there. Can you talk about that dynamic and how
Sure.
unique that is? Or are there other entities out there that are sort of doing some of that now?
Well, I mean, I'd say that part of it is intrinsic to union organizing in general, but I'd say we kind of take it to another level where it's like as member driven or worker driven as possible. So for instance, in the organizing conversation, the dynamic you were just describing, one would never try and force somebody to, take an action or form a union. What you're doing is you're trying to learn about them as people, and you're trying to learn about the issues that they care about, because people are motivated by what they care about. And so once you hear about and learn about them as people, form that relationship of trust and get at what really motivates them, then you find out, they really need healthcare because they've got 3 children, and then you talk to enough people and you realize, look, a lot of people care about this. And so you can really connect people around those shared issues, and you sort of agitate them to feel the injustice of it, and to feel like, oh, we're all worked up about this. We can do something about this collectively, because we're kind of taught to accept the things that we complain about, right? We're taught to accept the status quo, to complain and then move on. But part of organizing is helping people feel the injustice of it and then use that as the spur to take action. And so from there, it's like the give hope phase, the plan to win, right? We can do something about this. Other workers have won on this before. Here's how they did it. And so it's helping workers find that, right? Know how to talk to people in the ways that really foster other workers' input into the process and their abilities to assist with the organizing, and not just be a voice in it, but be the organizing, because there is no organizing outside of a group of people. Like if you're forming a union, the union isn't a group outside of those workers. It is the workers. And so it's the most successful, the more voice that they have. And we really put that at the forefront. And, Sam can attest that I helped them identify major issues, right? And then organize around those and figure out what would work best for their group, given their conditions. So they're the experts in their workplace. I was never the expert in their workplace. I know a lot about academic organizing, but, it was really helping them draw out the things in their workplace that they could focus on, as targets or actions to take, and then helping them refine those and things like that over time.
Sam, was there a particular dynamic that you saw? Like, I guess what I'm thinking of is, and maybe it's different in the context of an academic setting, where, there's a socialization that happens, or at least I perceive one in an academic setting that seems maybe, in some ways, more extensive than in other work situations. But I wonder if there were moments where there was a particular dynamic that kept coming up over and over again. Just as an example, like, it just occurs to me that a realization that the individual issues that a person had with their job turns out not to just be an individual issue, but rather something structural that more than themselves are impacted by. Was that one, or were there others that you came across?
I mean, without question, I think one of the key ones is universities are pretty hierarchical, right? They're almost feudal in the way that they rank people, right? And so there are perceived differences in conditions, and real differences in conditions across that spectrum, from full professor to adjunct, right? To grad worker to staff, those sorts of things. And what you found was, in this moment of crisis, when you started talking to people, even these full professors started to see their fields and their positions as precarious in the given context, and were able to find common cause with people that they normally wouldn't even talk to. And that's true of the same sorts of divisions across departments. And I think that that was not surprising to us, who were starting to organize and had been on the cutting edge of this from the beginning. But it was really, I'm really proud of the really broad coalition we put together to make this happen. And it was because really, at the end of the day, we share these working conditions. That became very obvious.
Don, the COVID had that effect on some level of like being the great equalizer, if you will, where, suddenly people realize like, oh, we're all in a similar situation. I mean, when you get to sort of like extreme contexts, these things become clear. I mean, we do this in the just in making an argument, you take it to the extremes to show, to magnify similarities or differences. How, going forward, and certainly we've seen a lot of labor activity over the past 2 years or so. How, going forward, do you maintain the clarity that COVID, that the pandemic provided, without that context, right? Because the further we get away from it, the more people are going to forget that, like, oh wow, yeah, they're willing to put us out there, and whether it's, I don't know, if I'm working as a waiter or a delivery or whatever it is, like they didn't, or a factory, like they didn't really care. And like, how do you maintain that level of consciousness going forward?
Yeah, and I'd say that I think workers kind of always had that consciousness. It's just that things became, even more dire in a way that they had to take action in an immediate way. And there was an organization that was there for them to do so that wasn't there previously. And a lot of workers around the country want to organize, they wanted to organize before the pandemic. They still want to organize. They want to form unions. But over the decades, certain politicians have made that incredibly hard. They've done all these things to create all these barriers for organizing unions, including creating a system where you have to hold an election after a card check. Card check is where you sign the cards, right? Then the NLRB schedules an election for down the line. The employer then brings in these corporate union busters to try and intimidate the employees, in essence, to scare them away from voting yes. And, sometimes that's effective. And so there are all these barriers that are in the way. And one of the things that EWOC does is helps to ease those barriers, because there's only so many unions, only so many union organizers in the country, only so many resources up against like all of this corporate money, right? That's coming into play to prevent this from happening. And so by having this broad network of volunteers who are all over the country and willing to help people in all sorts of situations, no matter how, I don't want to say how implausible, but, we'll work with people in a lot of different types of situations that might not seem immediately viable. And so we can really help them create the structures to have something grow and find its legs and potential over time, and then become even more attractive to, say, a potential parent union with which they would affiliate. If they're able to get this structure in place and do enough assessments of coworkers, et cetera. So we're really helping, I think, to fill a gap there, and that's necessary given all of the resources put into making organizing so difficult for workers, because workers do want it so much.
So, all right, two questions, final questions for you. If I'm working at a place and I am like, this our situation stinks here, and I don't know how to go about even approaching my fellow workers to find out, like, do they share this? I know there's there's that dude who works the late shift. He's been complaining about stuff, and maybe I'm going to approach him, but I want to use best practices and figure out how to do it. I'm not terribly good with people, whatever it is. How do they contact you? That's question one. And if I'm someone who's like, has some experience with organizing and I want to volunteer and be part of EWOC so that I can help the guy I was just talking about in scenario one, how does that work?
So you go to the same link for both and it'll be HTTPS, ://workerorganizing.org and then /. I don't know if there's a way to even
workerorganizing.org should probably just take us there. And then, and so what happens? Like, Sam, like, when did you do that? Like, who was the first person that reached out to EWOC? Do you know?
My friend, my friend of mine, Tom Hansberger, was the one who reached out to Dawn, and Tom and I, as well as another friend of mine, Sarah Kizik, had been really core to this organizing effort early on. And he reached out to Dawn, and I just wanted to follow up on that structure argument. We still have a union fight going today. We're organizing with the national union, pushing for a union for non-tenure track faculty and grad workers at Marquette. It's a real testament to kind of the lasting power of the work that EWOC does. They give you the skills and the structures you need to succeed long term. It takes a while, but I'm optimistic because of the foundation that they laid.
How did that first instance go down? Where you go onto the website and you contact? I mean, was how? If you want, we can mute Dawn, and no, I'm joking. But how did that go down? Because I think like one of the things that really prevents people from reaching out is a sense of like feeling intimidated. I don't know what to do here, and I'm just curious about that first initial contact, because by the time you get to where you are now, with like still having this union fight, a lot of those initial sort of concerns and barriers have gone away, and now you're just in the mix of the fight, and but you have the tools, and you have it really is just a question of a sheer sort of like a power battle. But in the beginning, it's not just a question of fighting the power of management or the employers. It's overcoming sort of some internal sort of blockages.
Right. No, and I mean, honestly, it's it's really easy. I mean, you reach out to EWOC, and you get a personalized email in return, right? So somebody follows up with you, and you have a discussion, and so it's really easy. The bar is really low. I think everybody should donate to EWOC so that they have the capacity to do more work. But it's not intimidating at all. And again, I mean, I think their worker-centered approach is really clear, even in that first instance, where they're there to ask what's going on with you, and then kind of what you want to fight for, and they'll offer kind of some ideas for what kind of structures or what kind of assistance they can offer as a result of that. And it's a really good way to get started, because these are some of the most experienced and effective organizers I've come across.